Son, and of the Holy Spirit. We ask you, Lord, that you can help us during this Bible talk today to understand that we have to pass from a religion of the temple to worship of the heart. Glory to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are today, as you know, you already have the Bible in your hands. So the readings of today are the third Sunday of Lent. First, we have the Decalogue, what we used to call the Ten Commandments. Then we have a short letter of Paul to the Corinthians, and then we have the Gospel of John, where Jesus drives away the sellers on the temple. So let me begin with an introduction. We will go later to a video that will help us understand the Temple of Jerusalem. But before that, a little introduction. Some of you have children. You want to talk about God to your children. One mistake that sometimes we do as educators is try to tell them about the law. What is the law of God? And we begin with that. And that is the wrong approach, because we have to begin by telling really how God loves and cares. And because God loves and cares, we have to answer in a way that He will still keep caring for us. So what He gave us, the Ten Commandments, is not other thing that some advice that are good for us to like a father who has an advice for the children. Okay, now since you have the Bible in your hands, I'll try to go a little fast. So I want you to read the passage where the Ten Commandments are written. And I want you to go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5. Deuteronomy, you have Exodus with you. I want to show you something. All right? So that's why we are in a Bible class. We have to learn how to work with the Bible. Okay? Go to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6 to 21. Okay? chapter 5, verse 6. You will see there that the title of chapter 5 in your Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 5. You got it? Okay. What is the title there? The Ten Commandments. All right? So it begins with verse 6. Verse 6 that reads, I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. Do not have other gods before me, etc. You got it, right? Now, this is because in the Bible we have two versions of the commandments. And the second version is the one that we are reading on Sunday, which is on Exodus. I tell you this because the books of, especially, all the books of the Bible, like the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there is not just a story written by, as the people thought before, that Moses was the one writing all these books. It's a lot of traditions. So sometimes it repeats. And this is an example of how the giving of the Ten Commandments by God to Moses is repeated. We have one version in Deuteronomy, and we have another version. Kindly go now to Exodus 20, 1 to 17. Okay. And then on, on Exodus 20, you have, the title is the Decalogue. Okay. It is the proper word because we call Ten Commandments, but actually, a Decalogue is a Greek word that means 10. 10 words. 10 words. This is what God gave to Moses, 10 words. Of course, here in verse 1 to 17, we are reading the long version. And you will find the Ten Commandments somehow hidden in this reading, especially at the end, they are very clear. All right? So I want to call your attention also, if you look at my Bible, because it's the same Bible that you have, it's a Christian Community Bible. Below the text, you have some commentaries. You have some little explanations, not so short this time, because it's important for you to connect, to understand the meaning of the text. The scholars and the people who went through the Bible before, the church is asking us to look it also, not only to the text, but also to the commentaries, so that we can, then the commentaries need to bring us back to the text. The text is the most important part. Commentary, then you can forget about that. But it's important that you read also. You see that I have even underlined here some passages here. You can do that at home because you have the Bible in your house. And it will explain a little bit more in detail in the short time that we have here just to talk about the Ten Commandments. So, the beginning of the chapter 20, it's called the Decalogue, the 10 words. It reads, God spoke all these words to Moses. He said, I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Do you remember these same words in the book of Deuteronomy you just read? Same, exactly the same. Out of the house of slavery. And this is very important because we have to understand the 10 words that Jesus gave connected with this first sentence. I am Yahweh your God. I am the one who took you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery, the land of Egypt. Do not have other gods before me. Do not. Here is a point that I'm sure you have heard before, because in the past, some people who were little knowledge of the Bible, really, and some kind of fundamentalist Protestants also, they come with, oh, you Catholics, you have images. The Bible says you cannot have images. You are adoring images. That is, the Bible forbids that. You ever heard that before? It is here. And we will try to understand the meaning today, okay? It is on verse 4 of Exodus 20, verse 4. Do not make yourself a carved image of any likeness or anything in heaven or on the earth beneath or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am Yahweh your God. I am a jealous God, etc. So, why do we have images? Look at the chapel. We have images here. Is that against the Bible?
It is very important to understand when.
Stop. That's one. Okay. It comes automatically. We will just go back to that. All right. The prohibition in the Old Testament to have images, the reason is very simple actually, is this. When the people were slaves in Egypt, the Pharaoh asked his people to put the images of their gods all over, wherever there were people working, the images of their gods and also the images of the Pharaoh himself. And he was telling them, look, the gods are looking at you. You better work well, because if you don't do your job, the gods will punish you. They are always watching you. This is the context of the prohibition of to make idols in the Bible, because you have only one God, and it's a jealous God. He wants to be adored, he himself to be adored, and not the rest. So, can we have images? First of all, as I said, this was a discussion. Maybe you don't hear that anymore, because actually this is passé. People, even good Protestants, they don't bring this topic anymore because it is a misinterpretation of the Bible. Everybody knows that we Catholic, we don't adore images. Images are just a remembrance that it helps us connect with our humanity so that we can relate to them. It's not that God needs intermediaries. There was in past centuries big devotion to the saints, and a saint is miracle worker for this, miracle worker for that. It's a wrong attitude. It's like when our faith is based on this saint is very miraculous, so you have to pray to this saint because it's going to get you what you want. And then you go to a church and you ask for this church is good to ask for rain. Then we have to go to another church because there is a statue there and there is a saint that will intercede for you when you are sick. And this is very weak faith. You know, in that sense, this text of the Old Testament it applies also to us. We have only Jesus is always ready and available for us. Of course, Mary the same. We don't adore Mary. We don't adore anybody. We only the saints. We only adore God. He's the only one. And the prohibition before was because the rulers of Egypt they will put all their gods around. God is watching you. God is not interested in punishing you. Actually, the Ten Commandments that we know by heart, uh, there are no legal rules. There is no punishment there. There is only a blessing in the word number 4. It talks about care for your parents, and your life will be blessed if you do that. Okay. In short, the Ten Commandments was given to the people of God at the time of Moses. We are talking about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 3,400 years ago. There is nothing new in the commandments. Okay? There is just natural law written in our hearts. That's the least that we can do. But you know something? It is very interesting that in the New Testament, the commandments are not mentioned. Only once by passing in the Gospel of Mark. No more. So why are the commandments not mentioned, being so important for the Jewish people? You see, the Jewish people, twice a day, they recite the commandment. When a boy reaches the age of 13, there is a special ceremony, and he has to recite the Ten Commandments in front of everybody. The Ten Commandments is a summary of the law, the Torah of the people of Israel. Very important. But when Jesus came, well, there is nothing there about the Ten Commandments because Jesus talks about the love of God. And Jesus tells us to love God and to love our neighbor. And let me read to you Romans 13, verse 8 and 9. Here, Romans 13. I will read for you. Do not be in debt to anyone. Let this be the only debt of one to another. Love. The one who loves his or her neighbor fulfills the law. Remember, the 10 words were a summary of the law, right? Now Paul tells us, okay, the one who loves his or her neighbor fulfills the law. For the commandments, do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not covet, and whatever else, are summarized in this one. You will love your neighbor as yourself. So there is a big jump from the Ten Commandments to the love of love that Jesus brought. And you see what is new here because, of course, in the love of love, the Ten Commandments are included there. But there is something that is also included in the law of love that is not included in the Ten Commandments. Several things. When we read the Gospel, we are invited, for example, to love our enemies. The Ten Commandments do not talk to us about love of our enemies. The New Testament talks us about forgiveness from the heart. The Ten Commandments don't talk about forgiveness. The New Testament talks about sharing our goods with our brothers and sisters in need. Love that fulfills the whole law in the passage that we just read. So, The Ten Commandments is just the bare minimum of a disciple, but we are invited to go much more farther than that. Because, and love God and love your brothers and sisters. That's the God. But then in the letter of John, at the end of the New Testament, says, love your brother, love your sister. Because if you love your brother and sister, you are loving God also as well. So it's only one commandment. Care for one another. And this has tremendous consequences in our devotional and practical religious life. Because some people believe that just fulfilling rituals, they fulfill the law. And actually, the commandment of the New Testament is to really care and love, transfer to daily life what we profess when we are in the church. So much for the first reading. We don't have time to go any further than that, okay? I want to say also a word about the second reading. Now, you have to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Yes, you have to name the page, but it's important also to learn, to look for the books of the Bible. You know where they are, right? Okay. Uh, it's very short, and Paul here talks. We have people who do not understand us. On the one hand, the Jews do not understand us, and on the other, the Greeks, the pagans, also do not understand us. Why is that? So it says, the Jews ask for miracles, and the Greeks for a higher knowledge, while we proclaim a crucified Messiah. For the Jews, what a great scandal, and for the Greeks, what nonsense. But he is Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, for those called by God among both Jews and Greeks. In reality, the foolishness of God is wiser than humans, and the weakness of God is stronger than humans. Paul says this because these two attitudes can infiltrate the Christian community, our communities, with the Jews, infiltrate to have our faith just to, uh, and our religion just to obtain graces and miracles. That is our faith. But Paul is saying, we are preaching Jesus the crucified. You are not a Christian just to pray, to ask for miracles. That is criticizing that. He says, there's a temptation that is coming. The other temptation is the Greeks say that we are foolish, believing in a man who has been crucified. Okay. So oftentimes you say, explain that to me. I don't believe until you explain it to me well. I don't see it. We want to rationalize everything. But having faith is a jump. It's a jump. You have to jump. You know the story, of the house that was being burned. A child was in the second floor, and on the window, and the house was burning, and the father was down there, and the father was waiting with the, people there, and the father says, "My child, jump, but I don't see you." The father says, "Don't worry, I see you. Jump, you trust." So our life of faith sometimes, is accepting also the mystery that comes with it. We don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. So in our dualistic mentality and way of living, we just accept what we can demonstrate, or it's not like that in our faith. This is the second reading, and Paul then calls our attention to that. Now we go to the gospel. Gospel is where is the gospel? Chapter, verse 13 to 25. Okay. And then the title that you have in the Bible there is that Jesus clears the temple. It is important, this passage that we read in the fourth Sunday of Lent, when Jesus cleans the temple. It's important because very seldom we have something told in the gospel that is told by the four evangelists. Four of them, they tell about this. So, meaning to say, when the gospel were written, the people still remember all the communities that were involved in the writings of the gospel. The difference is the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, place this episode at the end of the life of Jesus, the last time he went to Jerusalem. And John places that at the beginning of the gospel because it is a sign of what will happen to him at the end of his life. Some little explanation about the context of today's reading. Jerusalem was a big city at the time. For many years already, 1,000 years ago, David put his, his seat, his throne there in Jerusalem. And the city began to expand. At the time of Jesus, there were about 40 to 50,000 people living in Jerusalem. But when the feast of the Passover was arriving, pilgrims from all over the places and countries around, they were coming in pilgrimage to the temple. They have to go there. So during these days that the gospel narrates today, Jerusalem had as much as 180,000 people. So like 3-4 times more people than usual. These people had to live in the houses of the people, tents, it was very, very, very crowded. And the people were saving their money and, to do the pilgrimage of their life. Those who could do that would do that every year. We know that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, they came every year to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. They were only 150 kilometers away. Still, it's a big distance. But there were other people living in other countries and farther down. So they will come to pray, to offer sacrifices. Plus, the Temple of Jerusalem that you see here at the back was one of the marvels of the world at that time. It was huge. I will give you some details later about that. And just to give you an idea, the people who came, the pilgrims, they offered sacrifices. No, they had to buy animals. So they were very poor, pigeons, like Mary and Joseph. And when they came to the temple, they're poor, so they bought. That's what they offered. So some people say who have studied this, during these days, there were about 18,000 animals being slaughtered, offered in the temple. You can imagine. And some were big animals, some were very small. But there were 180,000 people in Jerusalem at that time, and they had to eat. So they, after burning, the offering in the temple, when it was cooked, then the meat was given to the people back so that they could have they could feed themselves. Okay. Now, one important detail is this also. They were coming from all over. They were coming with dollars. Okay, the money at that time, okay, the Roman currency. But they could not enter the temple with the Roman currency. It was forbidden because it has the face of the emperor. Could not. So they had to change, we will go into that later, into some smaller coins, some copper coins. And there were people changing that. And that is what Jesus is really angry with these people. The money changers, he threw out everything. And you see what happened? These people were employees of the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the rich people, the priests of the temple who were handling the administration of the big temple. And they were very rich. That was one of the reasons why they did not believe in the resurrection like the Pharisees. Because they said, our life is very good, so we don't have to worry about the next life later. We don't care about that. And so the people who were doing the exchange of money, the commission, of course, for good business. 12% commission, and that went to the pocket of the money changers and to the Sadducees because they had to pay also to them. At that time, the Temple of Jerusalem was the biggest bank in the whole Middle East. So much there is a passage of the book of Maccabees that says, so much gold, that it was in the temple there. Actually, when the temple was destroyed, I'm getting a little bit out of topic, but when the temple was destroyed in the year 70, 70, Jesus died in the year 30, when 33. When the temple was destroyed, the facade of the temple were thick in gold. So the people who destroyed the temple, the Romans, they took all the gold out. And because there was so much gold, the price of the gold really came down substantial. It was already all of a sudden gold all over. Okay, this is it's a little description out of the topic. So Jesus enters the temple, and we all have in our mind, a little bit of we have seen pictures of how is. Can you imagine the image that we have of Jesus? Meek, simple, kind, mabait, and then all of a sudden here he becomes a little violent. So the most, and Jesus doesn't say at the beginning any words, he just does it. Can you imagine the feelings of Jesus at that time? Nothing. If Jesus were to come today to some places where religion and money is still going hand by hand, huh? what would he do? Sometimes in our churches, in our institutions, in our life as Christians, in our businesses, would he also be enraged as he was at that time? Maybe so. Now, what I want to do now is to go a little bit deeper into the theological meaning of this gesture of Jesus that was very important. There was talk in the Bible, the prophets at the time, that they were waiting for a cleansing of the temple, the cleansing of religion, but it was understood they wanted a liturgy a little bit better done. They wanted that the animals that were sacrificed were very clean, with no spot. That was what they were waiting. But Jesus turns the tables around. Jesus made another choice. What Jesus did is not a purification of the temple, as sometimes we say. It turned around completely the relationship of people with God. It's very important because in the Jewish people, in the Old Testament, the presence of God, where was the presence of God? You remember your history of sacred history, God was present in the mountains when we talked to Moses. God in the Exodus on the cloud. God was present. The presence of God was in the ark. Remember, they took the ark to different places. They put the ark in the temple of Jerusalem. Finally, when the temple was built, in the most sacred place of the temple, I will show you later, that was what the people thought. That is what the people thought that the presence of God was. And Jesus comes saying, no, the temple is finished. The destruction of the temple will come 40 years later. But Jesus is actually the one who destroyed with his death and resurrection because the temple now is his body, is the risen Lord. That is our temple that we carry around wherever we go. So this is a little bit of the historical background. And now, yes, I have, you see, in our webpage, we have these videos, but now we have it with voiceover in English, in Spanish, and with subtitles. So I'm going to present to you a 10 minutes explanation of the Temple of Jerusalem. Okay? And we will stop whenever you have questions or I want to answer a little bit more. This is Father Fernando Armelini, the one that we follow. I made it's not a pilgrimage, the study tour to the Holy Land last year with him. It's amazing the knowledge that this man has. He's an archaeologist, a historian, a theologian, a biblical scholar. So, he knows in and out of so many places in Palestine. He was explaining to us what usually the tourist guide will not explain. All right. So let us listen to what he says. Actually, you will listen to my voice because it's a voiceover. Okay. I hope it is clear enough. Here we go. It's explaining then the Temple of Jerusalem. very provocative. At my back, you can see the recreation of what was the Temple of Jerusalem. We have to distinguish the term temple from the term sanctuary. The Gospels distinguish it very well. When we speak of temple, we mean the whole complex of porticos, courtyards, buildings, which were part. Let me tell you some little details about the temple that I do not mention there. Okay, that is the temple. I told you that it's big. Okay, now I'll tell you in meters. Okay, because it's not really a rectangle. It goes, one side is bigger than the other. On the east, it's 460 meters long. 460 meters long. Okay? Remember that the cities at that time were very small. 2,000 years ago. And this was huge, huge. Okay. In that side there, at the side, 280 meters. On this side here, this side here, 485 meters. Here, 315 meters. An area 144,000 square meters. Do you have an idea of how big is, let's say, a football, soccer field? It has the regular ones, professional ones, 130 meters long, okay, by 80 meters wide. The professional one is equivalent to 22 soccer fields put together. So if you put it here in Muiwo, the temple, I wonder if it would fit like from here to the Silver Mine Hotel. Huge, huge place, okay? So just to give you an idea, so every Jew, wherever they were in the world, their dream was to come here. And mind you, at the time of Jesus, we will see later, this temple was just completed, just finished. And those of you who are going next month or in May, you are going to Holy Land, remember this, because what you will see is the remnant, the destruction, what is left over, the crying wall of part of the temple. Let's continue. So it's explaining the temple, okay? Part of this enormous and magnificent structure, a true masterpiece of architecture, one of the wonders of the ancient world, built by King Herod the Great. Construction began in 19 before Jesus. So when Jesus was born, the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem had already started 11 or 12 years before. So what is the meaning of that? Herod the Great started the construction of the temple 19 years before our Christian era. And Jesus was, the temple, when Jesus was born, the temple had already started being built 11 years. You're following me? So we acknowledge, we know now, I told you many times, Jesus was born before the Christian era. Jesus did not die at the age of 33, okay? He died later than that, we will see. So, part of the temple is the sanctuary, the central part, where the people were convinced that they could find the Lord there. The pagans could even enter the temple, but the most sacred part, the sanctuary, was reserved only for the Israelites, those who belonged to the holy people. Okay, the temple being so big, this area here, you will enter there when you go there on May, okay? This area here, everybody could enter there, no restrictions. But as you advance here, there were a lot of barriers. The first barrier was to keep the foreigners out. And the Jewish people who were sick, lame, blind, lepers, those who had any defect, they could not go to the next patio, the next stage there. There was a barrier. And in the barrier it was written, if you cross here, you will die. That's it. So barrier. So inside that, all the Jewish people could enter, even women. After that, there was another barrier. Women could not pass, only men. Then there was another barrier. Only the priests could pass. Then there was another barrier. It's called the Sancta Sanctorum, the Holy of Holies, where the priest could enter only once a year. Zechariah, remember, entered there in the temple and stayed there for a long time. And in this Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, and the presence of God for the people were there. You get the idea? Okay, continue.
Let's take a good look, at the place where the episode took place. We see it very well in this reconstruction. I will only comment on two very important parts. One is the portico regio, which extended in the south of the explanade of the temple. Then we will see it better later. And the other part of this temple is the majestic staircase, which introduced to the gate of Coponio. It was the most beautiful of the four doors which were in the western part of this explanade. It was majestic, stupendous, so much so that the first Roman procurator, Coponius, gave his name to this door the year 6 after Christ. To give you an idea of the grandeur, the beauty of this explanade, I will give you some figures. It was elevated from the Roman street, also this work of Herod, the street that you see indicated. To the right and to the left of this street were businesses. This covered street was 8.5 meters wide. From this street until the entrance of the door, the stands rose 17.5 meters, which is equivalent to a 6-story building. But the most surprising thing is that the entrance, the steps, had a width of 15.2 meters. Perhaps the number does not say much, but imagine a width of these tires that equal the width of an avenue of 4 hands. This was for entrance to the royal portico of the Temple of Jerusalem. Why do I insist so much on the royal portico?
Today also, when you go to Jerusalem, you will see this still exists, but you will not see this anymore, okay? But this part still exists there.
Royal portico and this staircase, because the episode which is that was the regal portico, and descending on the regal porch, we descend to the staircase where we want to see these 4 compartments that are at the base. We see it in the excavations of the archaeologists.
This you will see today.
We are going to get closer to see them better. They have been preserved, were part of the base of the staircase, and it is in this place where the money changers operated. They exchanged the pilgrims' money for the coins that would be used inside the explanade of the temple by the pilgrimage. In the explanade of the temple, no coins with the effigy of the emperor could be introduced. Therefore, those who wanted to offer a sacrifice had to change the currencies that were used in the market in the city of Jerusalem. and the commission was very large. In making the change, there were big gains for those who managed this economy, which revolved around the religious practice of the Temple of Jerusalem. We know very well, and by name, those who were the managers of this economy, Anna and Caiaphas and their families. I will comment how we came to know that this was the place where the coins were exchanged. It is actually very simple. When the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed, and what you see now are the remnants of that destruction, the archaeologists have found in front of these compartments the perutot, that is, the currency which had no value outside the temple, but only within the temple. Therefore, archaeologists say that if they have been found there, it is because it was there that they changed these coins. They are from the year 70. And you can observe the two types of coins. Those of Tirebius, which were used in the markets of the city, and the perutot, that were only used in the Temple of Jerusalem. Archaeologists found the perutot there, where the money changers were. And we are in the year 70. And this tells us that the gesture made by Jesus did not end with the trade in the name of religion. I think that after Jesus scattered the tables of the money changers, soon after, perhaps even after 1 hour or so, the money changers would have returned to their post. In fact, the same religious practice was still in force in the year 70. But the prophetic gesture made by Jesus left the mark. Not that he immediately changed everything, but it laid the foundation of the new religion, the new way of relating to God. After this introduction, which I believe is very important to concretely understand what Jesus has done, let us now move forward. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. The evangelists tell us that this happened at the last Passover. It was the drop that made the cup pour. The authorities could not stand Jesus any longer, and after this gesture they decided that he should be eliminated because it undermined the whole religious institution that the temple priests practiced. The evangelist John puts it at the beginning of his gospel because it is an emblematic sign of everything that will happen later. The relationship of Jesus with the Temple of Jerusalem. You can see on my back a representation of the many coins that were collected. For it was at the time of Easter when all the coins were taken to Jerusalem, collected by the tax that all Israelite male had to pay for the temple. It was the moment when it was gathered throughout the Roman Empire. All these coins ended up in the temple. At that time, the temple was considered the largest bank in the Middle East. In chapter 3 of the second book of the Maccabees mentioned that the treasure of the Temple of Jerusalem was the height of immense wealth, so that the sum was incalculable. This is the introduction. Let us now turn to the text. In the temple,
That is enough there. I missed one part here that I wanted to show you.
and we now appreciate the southern part, the one that looked at Siloam, and finally we entered the great regal portico. It had a length of 185 meters.
Got the money outside, perutot. They would bring their money, all the animals, all the things were here, they were selling that. And this is where Jesus enters. in this place here and throw them all out. Okay? And then runs through the stairs down and also goes there where the money changers are also and also throws all the coins around.
It had a length of 185 meters. It had 4 rows of monolithic columns,
185 meters long, columns.
10 meters high. And then there were the Corinthians capitals that were 6 feet high. We admire this regal portico and also contemplate the sanctuary that is now seen. You can also see the smoke of holocausts. We are at Easter time when Jesus made this gesture. Therefore, the temple was crowded with pilgrims who came to offer their sacrifices and then to eat the lamb on Easter night. And this is the atmosphere when Jesus performed the...
So just to give you an idea, so that we know exactly there. And basically then, what Jesus does is a prophetic action to change completely the way of relating ourselves with God. This is so important because somehow we are still rooted on the tradition of the temple. Where do you find God? Well, we go to church to find God. Yes, of course, Jesus is here, but it's also out. Especially when we carry, whatever you do, wherever you go, John Paul II used to tell to the young people, whatever you do, wherever you go, Jesus goes with you. So it's not only there. And the presence of God is not in a place, it is in a person. It is the person of Jesus. That became clear only after the resurrection. And you see, in this place here, everybody could enter, but then there were, as I said, many barriers. Jesus destroyed all the barriers. When Jesus sent out all the people who were here, the buying and selling, also those who were buying, he did not ask the lame, the sick, the lepers to go out. Jesus did not touch them, touch the other ones. The ones who for him was profaning the meaning of the temple. Okay? Now, I will read to you a passage of the letter of the Ephesians that in this context, it will make a lot of sense. You will see. The letter of Ephesians was, of course, attributed to St. Paul, but it's a long process of discernment and study of the Christian community. Chapter 2, verse 13 to 15. Ephesians. So, remember, the time of Jesus, foreigners, they could not enter. Women only to a certain place. Yeah, a lot of barriers. Now, Jesus does away with everything. And this is how the letter of the Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 13, reads. Now, in Christ Jesus, and by his blood, you who were once far off, you could not enter, have come near. The people who read this letter, they understood very well that was referring to the temple of Jerusalem. Okay, continue. For Christ is our peace, he who has made the two people one. Who are the two people? The pagans, the non-believers, and the believers, the Jews and the pagans. He made of all people one, destroying in his own flesh the wall, the hatred which separated us. He abolished the law with its commands and precepts. He made peace in uniting the two people in him, creating out of the two one new man. This is very powerful. You see, as you know, the people at that time, they had a lot of laws, not only the 10 words, the 10 commandments. They had, through the years of the rabbis with their teaching, they have 613. And some other rabbis, because they were reading here, and they said, God has given us 10 words. How come? Now we have 613. So where are they? So they were very creative. Their imagination was very big. They said, "Oh, between one letter and the other, in the stone that God gave to Moses, there were the 613 laws were, somehow hidden there. Just a wild imagination. Okay, nothing. Now, so this is the area where the money changers were. This is huge, you see. This is 15 meters wide. And this is, Jesus came here, and this is where he went, this area here. And he did not go to this part here. But the people who were here, the Sadducees, the priests, the people in charge of the temple, as soon as they saw Jesus doing what he was doing, said, "Hey, on what authority are you doing this?" Remember? Yeah, of course, they were very upset. And this was really the last drop that sealed Jesus' fate because of this tremendous noise that Jesus made there. Then they decided really to destroy him, to kill him. What sign do you give? Oh, Jesus said, destroy this. What is it? Yeah. Destroy this sanctuary. It's not talking about the temple. Remember, the temple is this. The translation is destroy this sanctuary, because the presence of God was in the sanctuary. The temple was much bigger than the sanctuary. This is the sanctuary here. The wall. Destroy this sanctuary. They misunderstood, of course. And in 3 days, I will rebuild it. Of course, he was talking about his own passion, death, and resurrection. Okay? And they tell, you are going to destroy this. 46 years it took to build this. And we know that Herod the Great, the one who did this and this road here and so many other things, he was a great, great architect, was a perverse man. He killed his own family, brothers. Even when he was dying, he was killing people. But he was a great architect. And this is a marvel. Okay? So, but he died on the year 4 before Jesus. So, how come he received the Magi and told them, of course, then we know, because of the history of Rome, that this man, Herod the Great, died 4 years before Jesus. And that the temple started 19 years before Jesus, before the Christian era. And Jesus was born around the year 9 before Christian era. So we know that this was, when Jesus is here, was the year 28 of our Christian era. And Jesus was about 35 years old at that time. So I'm giving you certain numbers. It's not the first time that I tell you about this. So that this is in Bible classes, you go a little bit deeper. It's not really that important for our faith, but it's important that we are instructed and we know about that, okay? Bottom line, and we have to finish, okay? Because it's time to assume that performance of rituals is sufficient for our relationship with God is wrong. This, what we are doing here today at the Mass, is not enough. If the rituals that we perform do not translate into works of love and justice, then God does not like our rituals. The commandment that he gave us is love one another with all the consequences. And that is the thermometer. That's what we're going to say, if our rituals is okay or not. At the end of the gospel, it says, many people believed in Jesus, but Jesus did not trust them. Why? Because these people who saw him making so many miracles and signs, They were following him because he was a miracle worker. And Jesus knew that that would not last. The same could happen to us. So our faith has to be rooted in the cross, in the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. This is our, this is the new temple. The new temple is Jesus himself, the resurrected body of the Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.